Tonight at 10, on the eve of his inauguration, Donald Trump promises immediate action to start fulfilling his campaign pledges. He flew into the nation's capital less than 24 hours before being sworn in as 45th President of the United States. One of his first official duties, to remember America's fallen, as his deputy promised early action on pledges made.
We focused at the President-elect's direction on a Day 1, a Day 100, and a Day 200 action plan for keeping our word to the American people and putting the President-elect's promises into practice.
We'll be looking ahead to tomorrow's events in Washington, D.C., and we'll be asking some Trump voters for their expectations of the next 4 years. Also tonight, at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, Theresa May tells business leaders that Britain wants to forge a new role in the world after Brexit. From IRA commander to key figure in Northern Ireland's government, Martin McGuinness retires from frontline politics. Dozens are missing, feared dead after an avalanche engulfed a hotel for skiers in central Italy. And a French win in record time in the Vendée Globe race, one of the world's toughest sporting challenges.
In the south, tackling rough sleeping, a council wins government money for a project to help the homeless. And the social care crisis, pay more or lose local services. A referendum on a 15% rise in council tax.
Good evening. Donald Trump is in Washington, D.C. tonight on the eve of his inauguration as 45th President of the United States. The ceremony on Capitol Hill is expected to draw hundreds of thousands of spectators as Mr. Trump takes the oath of office before taking up residence at the White House. His Vice President, Mike Pence, said today that the transition team had been working flat out to ensure that they would be ready on day one to start to implement Mr. Trump's policies. Our North America editor, John Sopel, is at the White House tonight. Let's join him.
Hugh, thank you. And Washington this evening is a city in flux, a city undergoing profound change. Tonight, the Obamas will spend their last night in the White House. And just across the street from here is Blair House, the government guest house, where the Trumps will be staying. And then tomorrow, at midday exactly, it's all change. No longer a plane with Trump emblazoned on the side. The president-elect arrived in Washington aboard a US military jet. And this is the brand he'll now be promoting, defending and representing: the United States of America. And though not yet Commander-in-Chief, it was a first opportunity to practice his salute as the base commander greeted him and the future First Lady, Melania. Across the city, the future Vice President was thanking the current administration for their help in the transition and reflecting on the magnitude of what's about to unfold.
It is a momentous day before a historic day, and I'm pleased to have a chance to report to the American people and to all of you the progress that we have made at the President-elect's direction.
Washington is a city in transition. It's out with the old and in with the new as the Obamas' possessions are loaded up and taken away. Michelle Obama tweeting one last photo from the balcony of her home these past 8 years. And a video of one last walk through the house with Sonny and Beau. The new tenants pick up the keys tomorrow. Today they were being feted at a lunch at where else? The Trump International Hotel, with Republican congressional leaders.
I want to thank everybody. We've had such great support in this room.
But amidst the glad-handing schmooze fest that is part and parcel of any inauguration, the solemnity too. The nation's future leaders going to Arlington Cemetery and the tomb of the unknown soldier to pay their respects to those who've made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. Hundreds of thousands are converging on Washington for the inauguration. Tonight, a Make America Great Again concert at one of the nation's most famous monuments, the Lincoln Memorial. Anticipation and expectation are high.
Since the day he came down that escalator in Trump Towers, I was on board.
I got to sing the national anthem for Mr. Trump 5 different times at his rallies, and so I received an invitation in the mail.
He has the chance to be like the next Ronald Reagan.
But not everyone coming to Washington is here to laud Donald Trump. There'll be protesters too. The inauguration marks the peaceful transfer of power, but it doesn't signify a unified nation.
John Sopel there, our North America editor. We'll be talking to John in a short while again. In his inaugural address tomorrow, Donald Trump is expected to set out his personal vision for America's future, in line with his familiar campaign pledge to make America great again. It was a pledge which made a big impact in what's called the Rust Belt, those states in the old industrial heartland. Our North America correspondent Nick Bryant considers the view from Pennsylvania on what voters there are now expecting.
Places of American decline that make sense of Donald Trump's rise. And it wasn't just working class rage that helped him reach the White House, but despondency.
We can be just as competitive as other countries.
Rick Rowland supported him precisely because he was a billionaire businessman. And he's been impressed with how the president-elect has fought during the transition to keep car manufacturing jobs in America.
We were a manufacturing powerhouse at one point. When you say, well, we're going to make America great, well, maybe that means we're going to restore that sense of optimism in people, that yes, tomorrow will be better than today.
And Trump can do that.
Well, it remains to be seen, but, at least he's talking about it.
The neat take on Donald Trump is that critics took him literally, but not seriously, and supporters took him seriously, but not literally. They didn't necessarily believe everything he said, but he was talking and listening to them, which is why in working class communities, expectations are so high that he will create manufacturing jobs and reverse industrial decline.
We joke about the magic switch.
The magic switch.
Absolutely, the magic switch. Just flip it on and plant's up and running again.
Ron Baroff looks after this derelict old steel plant and jokes about the magic switch that President Trump will flick to bring it back to life.
They're not thinking rationally, they're thinking with their hearts and not their heads. And it will lead to a lot of disappointment and people being discontent because it can't happen the way they envision it to be. As much as we would love it, industry just isn't what it was, period.
And look what's happening just up the road in Pittsburgh. Uber is testing out its driverless cars. And research labs are developing robots and drones that will deliver the next wave of automation.
So the irony is, during this political season, that although Trump has made the claim that it's foreign trade and outsourcing which is killing jobs, really, by a factor of 4 to 1, the blame goes to automation.
In this age of disruptive technology, Donald Trump was the ultimate disruptive candidate. But making history was one thing. In these Rust Belt communities, he'll find it hard to reverse it. Nick Bryant, BBC News, Pennsylvania.
Well, as President Trump prepares to take office, there'll be an even sharper focus on his relationship with Russia and with President Putin. The outgoing US President, Barack Obama, has underlined that having a constructive relationship with Russia is in the interest of America and indeed of the wider world. Our Moscow correspondent, Steve Rosenberg, considers the view from Russia on the Trump-Putin relationship.
If Donald Trump redecorates the White House, here's something for the West Wing, perhaps. A gift from Russia with love. Artist Nika Safronov says America's new leader reminds him of Napoleon and a pirate. And although Nikas did have all bases covered, he says he always believed it was Trump who'd create a fresh canvas for US-Russian relations. The American people made the right choice, he says. We hoped Trump would win. But did Moscow do more than just hope? This month, a US intelligence report claimed the Kremlin tried to influence the election for Trump through cyber attacks, internet trolls, and a media campaign. The report highlights the role of RT, calling the channel the Kremlin's principal international propaganda outlet. Today, it hit back.
How awful it is to see that such a huge and powerful country relies on such bad, sloppy, and just funny intelligence.
Is RT putting out Kremlin propaganda?
It's the same as what they say about the BBC and the CNN here in Russia.
There are separate allegations that the Kremlin has been cultivating Donald Trump for at least 5 years and that Moscow has managed to compromise him. These claims are unsubstantiated but potentially explosive. So, Donald Trump, a Kremlin stooge? Fake news, say his supporters, and Moscow says the same. But the fact that some people are even suggesting that Russia influenced an American election, that means that Russia will loom large over America's new president. And from the Kremlin today, this call for cooperation.
We desperately need good relationship with Washington, but it takes two to tango. And what will be the approach by President Trump? This is the question.
Meanwhile, outside Moscow, at a restaurant called The Trump, they're celebrating the inauguration with a new creation, the Donald Trump Burger. Like the man himself, it's larger than life and, for some, difficult to swallow. It's a symbol of the high hopes, the very high hopes Russia has for Trump and its appetite for a closer relationship. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
So let's go back to the White House and John Sopel, our North America editor. John, in that first address to America and the world after the ceremony tomorrow, what kind of tone do you think Mr. Trump will strike?
Well, I don't think it's going to be a long list of detailed policies. I don't think we're going to hear about building a wall with Mexico and repealing Obamacare and rewriting trade deals. Instead, we're being told it's going to be more philosophical, sincere, personal about what it is to be an American, the duty of being a citizen, what government can do for the people. And so I think Donald Trump will be trying to paint with a very broad brush, but also very conscious, like he said when he got elected, that he was here to unify the American people. Because what we're also going to see over this weekend of the inauguration, not just the parties and the bulls, but also the protests as well. Because many Americans are still not reconciled to the idea of a Trump presidency.
Let's talk about expectations, John, as we look ahead to the next 4 years. The report there from Pennsylvania, lots of people with very high expectations of this presidency. What is your sense of that and the risks involved there for Mr. Trump?
And Hugh, talking to the people who are converging on Washington today to support Donald Trump, yeah, they genuinely do believe he's going to make America great again. Just like 8 years ago when Barack Obama had that word hope around his neck, well, Donald Trump has got Make America Great Again. And he's going to have to deliver on jobs, on trade deals. And I think you're going to see him wanting to act very quickly on all of those things. But, you know, with some of the jobs, they haven't just gone to cheap labour from Mexico or the Philippines. They've gone to non-passport carrying robots. That's an issue. But he can set up an infrastructure bill which could funnel billions of dollars into the US economy, desperately needed, and that will create jobs. So I think he will turn the taps on spending so that he can deliver on that promise to create those jobs.
John, we'll talk again tomorrow, of course, but for now, thanks very much. John Sopel there for us at the White House. Now, the Prime Minister says that she's held positive discussions with leading banks after a number of them warned they might relocate jobs to the European Union after Brexit. Theresa May was speaking at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, where she also told business leaders that global companies needed to reform and to change to regain public trust. Our economics editor, Kamal Ahmed, has more details.
Wrapped up warmly, whisked from private meetings with bankers to private meetings with millionaire technology entrepreneurs, it's frankly hard to come to Davos and not look like a member of the global elite. But although the Prime Minister was here to insist that Britain was open for business, she was also here with a warning.
Talk of greater globalisation can make people fearful. For many, it means their jobs being outsourced and wages undercut. It means having to sit back as they watch their communities change around them. And in their minds, it means watching as those who prosper seem to play by a different set of rules.
Theresa May came to the World Economic Forum, Davos, not so much to celebrate business as to warn it. Yes, she backs globalization, she backs free trade, she backs a deal with the European Union. But she had another message for this rather privileged audience. Do more to make globalization work for everyone. And if you don't, she will be quite willing to intervene to ensure businesses change their behavior.
It was sunny here today, yes, but the Prime Minister's visit to Davos was overshadowed as a number of international banks, including Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, said they were reducing investment or planning to cut jobs as Britain planned for Brexit. But many reflect that the city is a big place with different voices. For Barclays, London is still in the lead.
I think the UK will continue to be the financial lungs for Europe. We may have to move certain activities, we may have to change the legal structure that we use to operate in Europe, but I think it's going to be at the margin and will be manageable.
I caught up with the Prime Minister later.
What have the banks said to you about why they are moving jobs?
I've had a very good positive discussion with banks about the benefits of the City of London, about what it is that has brought them to the City of London and how we can continue to build on that for the future. And there are huge benefits for investment in the UK. We have a fundamentally very strong economy. We have a service sector that is very important to us but is valued around the world. I believe that truly global Britain can bring jobs and prosperity to the UK across the board, including in financial services.
It is time, she says, to look at the wider horizon. But will the world's business leaders enjoy the view? CP Gurnani employs over 112,000 people from India to Britain.
Frankly, UK will have to spend a lot more time explaining what their positions in this global world means. The reality is it is no longer a block of nations that you work together with.
Theresa May has admitted the journey ahead will be uncertain, but she claims a bright future and says free trade deals are being discussed with India and Australia. But, just as with the EU, discussions are just that. The hard negotiations are yet to come. Kamal Ahmed, BBC News, Davos.
Martin McGuinness, the former IRA commander who became a pivotal figure in the political establishment in Northern Ireland, is to retire from frontline politics. He said he would not be capable of fighting the forthcoming election campaign because of serious health problems. Mr McGuinness's political opponents have paid tribute today to his commitment to providing stable government in Northern Ireland, even when it meant sharing power with his former enemies. Our chief correspondent, Gavin Hewitt, has the story.
Martin McGuinness is one of the most controversial leaders in British and Irish politics, a central figure in both Northern Ireland's pain and its peace. Now he's standing down due to illness.
I have to be very honest with myself. The question I ask myself is, are you capable? Are you physically capable of fighting this election with the intensity that elections need to be fought? And the honest answer is that I'm not physically capable.
His background lay in the civil rights riots in Londonderry, but Martin McGuinness chose violent resistance. By the age of 21, he was second in command of the IRA in Derry, talking about the bombing campaign.
Can you say whether the bombing is likely to stop in the near future in response to any public demand?
Well, we will always take into considerations the feelings of the people of Derry, and these feelings will be passed on to our GHQ in Dublin, you know.
He served 2 prison sentences in the Irish Republic. He was also convicted of IRA membership. He openly attended IRA events. He denied that he was the IRA Chief of Staff, but said he regarded it as a compliment.
We don't believe that winning elections and winning any amount of votes will bring freedom in Ireland. At the end of the day, it will be the cutting edge of the IRA which will bring freedom.
Today he was asked whether he had any regrets about his days in the IRA.
Well, I think people have to consider the circumstances that existed in this city when I did join the IRA. We had a city where people were being murdered by the RUC, where they were being murdered wholesale, as they were in Bloody Sunday, by the parachute regiment. And the fact that many young people like myself, supported by many thousands of people in the city, I'm not saying they were the majority, decided to fight back. I don't regret any of that.
But he was one of the IRA leaders who recognised that continued violence would not bring further political gains. In 1994, there was a ceasefire. It laid the foundation for peace talks. Sinn Féin nominated him as its chief negotiator, leading to the Good Friday Agreement and eventually power sharing. Bitter foes sat alongside each other in a new assembly.
Not an inch and no surrender. My journey's been a long journey. I've been over 25 years working on building the peace.
But many could not forget his past.
I want justice for my father.
Absolutely.
I believe that you know the names of the killers of my father.
No, I don't.
And I want you to tell me who they are.
I don't know their name.
But the man who had fought the British state eventually won recognition as a peacemaker.
Are you well?
Thank you very much. I'm still alive.
Nice to see you again.
Martin McGuinness's departure from politics comes at a sensitive time for Northern Ireland. Its power-sharing assembly has collapsed, and Brexit poses difficult questions about the future of the border with Ireland.
What I have done today was to make it clear that
Tonight in Derry, Martin McGuinness addressed his nationalist supporters. Others, however, have struggled to forgive a leader so steeped in the violence of the past. But he earned grudging respect for his commitment to peace. The gunman who turned politician had the authority to make compromises. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, Belfast.
Let's go live to Belfast tonight and our Northern Ireland political editor, Mark Devonport. Let's talk about Mr McGuinness's legacy, Mark. How do you see it?
Well, Hugh, relatives of IRA victims may well say good riddance to Martin McGuinness because, as Gavin made clear there, he was an IRA leader at the time that the organisation was carrying out attack after attack, even stooping to tactics like sending hostages to their certain deaths in car bombs that were detonated before they could get out of them. At the same time, though, he was a key influence in moving the IRA from war to peace, and it was the fact that people knew that he'd been there at the sharp end that gave him the authority to convince other Irish Republicans to come with him and to denounce those who still clung to the gun as traitors to the island of Ireland. So the next generation that comes won't have that same authority. They won't have the international recognition of Martin McGuinness. They do face challenges in struggling with the collapse of the power-sharing executive here in Northern Ireland, but hopefully they won't face the same kind of conflict of which Martin McGuinness was both part of the problem and part of the solution.
Mark, again, thanks very much. Mark Devonport there with his thoughts on the Martin McGuinness decision today. Now, the political crisis in Gambia has intensified with troops from neighbouring Senegal entering the country in support of its newly elected president. Adama Barrow has been unable to take office because Gambia's long-standing leader, Yahya Jammeh, is refusing to step down following his election defeat. The Foreign Office is advising against all but essential travel to the country. 6 Britons have been killed in a minibus crash in Saudi Arabia. The group had been on a pilgrimage to Mecca. Victims included 4 members of one family, including a baby. 4 other passengers were injured. Now, dozens of people are feared dead after an avalanche destroyed a hotel being used by skiers in central Italy. At least 3 people are known to have died. Rescue teams are searching for up to 35 people still trapped. The avalanche happened yesterday after a series of powerful earthquakes struck in the area of Abruzzo, which is around 150 miles from Rome. Our correspondent James Reynolds sent this report.
At night, the quickest way through the wall of snow was on skis. These rescuers are among the most experienced in Europe. Even they struggled to move forward. Step by step, they shoveled their way up towards the Rigopiano Hotel. Finally, they made it. The hotel was silent. Inside, rescuers found this man. They went further in and came to where the avalanche hit. A 6-foot-high wall of snow and rock broke through the building's walls. Several miles away, a father waited for news of his daughter up in the hotel. Straight after yesterday's earthquakes, they texted each other. "Stay calm," he wrote. "You can come down tomorrow." "Calm, that's hard," she replied. "I think that the worst has already happened," he reassured her. "What's going on?" he then asked. He got no reply. His daughter and many other people may be trapped underneath these tons of snow. These pictures, filmed after daybreak, show the Rigopiano Hotel swept away by the avalanche.
Do you think it's possible to find more people alive?
For sure, yes. For sure, yes. In the past, we found people after 3 days or something like this, and especially in this case, could be some room under the snow.
Tonight, conditions here have improved. We haven't felt any more earthquakes or tremors, and rescue workers will want the snow to hold off to allow them to keep digging. Italy's Prime Minister has said that the entire country is holding its breath. James Reynolds, BBC News in Penne, central Italy.
Now, the latest crime figures for England and Wales revealed there were more than 5 million offences of fraud and computer crime in the year to September. It's the first time figures for those crimes have been included, and it's seen the total number of offences jump to nearly 12 million. People are now twice as likely to be a victim of credit card or online fraud as they are to be a victim of vehicle theft, for example. Surrey County Council, which is run by a Conservative administration, is to hold a referendum on whether to increase council tax by 15% to sustain its social care service. The council says there's a huge gap in its budget and blames cuts imposed by Conservative ministers at Westminster. The area includes the constituencies of Chancellor Philip Hammond and Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt, as our Deputy Political Editor John Pienaar explains.
You don't get a choice about getting old, but how to pay the huge bills for care. Councils pay most, and one's had enough of government cuts, of paying for more with less. £170 million less since 2010. Surrey's asking council taxpayers yes or no to a 15% increase for social care.
I think it's important that politicians stand up and tell the truth and be honest with the resident and tell them what it costs to run these services. We have to pay for these services.
It's not easy finding people here who are keen to pay what will be nearly £200 a year more on an average home, though no one could call Surrey hard up. Hi there.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, the council want 15% increase.
So I believe I heard it on the 1 o'clock news
How
today.
about some more of that money for the council for social care?
Certainly not.
Why
That's
not?
Totally obscene. There's lots of money in Surrey, but that doesn't mean to say, you know, we're going to accept 15% rate increase. It's not on.
I think it's a very bad idea. I can't afford to pay because my pension is frozen.
More council tax to pay for social care. Do you fancy that, yes or no?
I'm up for it. I think we live in a very affluent area. I think we can all afford it, and there are lots of people around who need it more than we do.
Absolutely, I think that's right.
Clearly it's a national cost. I mean, a sign of a civilised society is one which looks after and cares for its older people responsibly, and I think it's a problem that's going to escalate over the years. It's not going to go away, and we have to address it.
The Labour leader also agrees all taxpayers should bear the rising cost of social care.
It's not right that we should thrust the social care crisis on local authorities, all of whom have different levels of income all over the country. It's a central government responsibility, and the central government should face up to its responsibility.
Local voters have been asked to vote on a council tax rise just once in England in the last 5 years. The answer was no. The local MPs here include the Health Secretary and the Chancellor, and they'll be watching this local referendum very, very carefully. If Surrey votes no to this council tax rise, it could mean cuts in local services. But it could also force ministers to confront a tough and perhaps unpopular set of decisions on the future funding of social care that many say government after government have avoided for far too long. John Pienaar, BBC News, Esher in Surrey.
Now, one of the world's toughest sporting challenges, the Vendée Globe Round the World Yacht Race, has yet again been won by a Frenchman. This time, it's Armel Lecléache, who crossed the finishing line off the west coast of France in a record time of 74 days. The Welsh sailor Alex Thompson, who recovered from a very poor start, now looks set to come second. Our sports correspondent Natalie Perks reports now from Les Sables d'Olonne.
After 10 unpredictable weeks in the world's most dangerous seas, a Frenchman celebrating victory was a well-told story. What wasn't was the Hampshire yachtsman who gave him a real run for his money. For 3 months, Alex Thomson has battled everything the ocean's thrown at him. Eaten only freeze-dried noodles and survived on as little as 20 minutes sleep every few hours. At stake was his lifelong obsession of becoming the first Briton to win this race. Dame Ellen MacArthur also came second in 2001.
When you've been at sea for that long and you know you're not going to win the race and you're absolutely exhausted, I think that's pretty brutal. So hopefully he'll have a smile at the finish line, but it will have been very, very tough for him.
Thomson set off from here, Les Sables d'Olonne, on the 6th of November, heading out of the Bay of Biscay, down to the equator and into the South Atlantic. He headed round Antarctica, under the Cape of Good Hope, and passed round Australasia, across the South Pacific, where he passed Point Nemo, the furthest place from civilization on Earth, before heading round Cape Horn, back up the Atlantic and negotiating the equator once more. When he arrives back here at Les Sables early tomorrow morning, he'll have notched up somewhere between 25 to 30,000 nautical miles. For Alex, there have been good moments.
It's a good day. The Southern Ocean, and it's sunny. Look at this.
Bad moments.
I do wonder why I do it sometimes.
And moments over Christmas where his family worried he was going slightly mad.
Jingle bells, Alex sails, round the world he goes.
His wife is simply desperate to get him home.
I can't wait. I'm so excited about seeing him. I have spoken to him, I have been in contact, but actually seeing him is just totally different. I can't wait.
Just 2 weeks into the race, his boat got badly damaged, which hugely affected his speed. Despite this, though, Thomson still caught up to within 34 miles of the winner and also smashed the world record for the greatest distance sailed solo in 24 hours. But what's perhaps better than a world record after 3 months at sea? His team have promised to have on hand a hot burger and a cold beer. Natalie Perks, BBC News, Vendée.
Quick reminder, Newsnight's about to begin on BBC Two. Here's Emily.
Tonight we're live in Washington on the eve of a seminal moment for America. There is a nervous excitement to this city. The streets are starting to fill up. But are they Trump supporters who've travelled across the land, or Trump protesters marching against this inexorable chapter of history? Join me now on BBC Two.
That's Newsnight with Emily in Washington. But that's it from us here on BBC One. It's time for the news where you are. Have a good night.